Okay, we're alive. Hi, this is William Ramsey. Welcome to William Ramsey Investigates. On today's show, I have a very special guest. His name is Antonio Salazar-Hobson, and he published a really fascinating memoir on March 31st, 2022. The title is Antonio, We Know You, and he's had a remarkable life. He started as really in the agricultural field, picking fruit and cotton as a young man of the 11th child of 14 children. But he's going to talk more about this arc. He's met some really remarkable people and done remarkable things. So I'm glad that he's agreed to the interview. So Antonio, and he's going to do some readings from the book as well. But Antonio Salazar-Hobson, welcome to the show. Thanks for agreeing to the interview.
Well, thank you so much. It's a great honor to be with you today. Your coverage for decades of very progressive causes is very impressive to me. My name is Antonio Salazar-Hobson, and I've written a book entitled Antonio, We Know You. It's a book about family love, family reconciliation, Chicano cultural pride, the labor movement, faith, all beginning with my kidnapping at age 4.5 in front of my siblings by white pedophiles, and obviously that led to several years of intense difficulties, but I survived, and I just wanted to say that the only reason I survived is that my mother, Petra, Salazar Bailon, took extra care of me because I was a mute child. And she showed me how to love. And but for those 4.5 years, uh, without having that, I would have not been able to make it. But that was my North Star that assured me that I would come home. I'd just also like to say that at the outset, that the title of my book comes from Cesar Chavez, and who took me under his wing at the age of 15. He inspired me to become a labor lawyer, and I was able to work with him until his death for almost 2 decades. And my book has a foreword by Jimmy Santiago Baca, the most renowned Chicano writer and poet of the last 40 years. And he has supported my book from its beginning. So,
And maybe we can start at the beginning. What was it like growing up in that family in an agricultural section of Arizona? Can you talk about before your abduction, what life was like?
sure. I mean, what happened is that I was in the 11th, and I was utterly accepted by all my siblings and and my mother. And even though she loved them all equally, she needed to spend extra time with me. We came from an abysmally poor family, 40 years picking fruit on the national circuit. I worked for 4 seasons picking fruit, and we lived in poverty for the entire period. We ended up in Phoenix, Arizona, at living in a set of projects, and that gave us our first home after all those decades. So, I spoke only Spanish. I was involved with all the games of my siblings, and I never felt any discouragement for my current condition, and that's how my family treated me. So I was very lucky, and so uh, so
Do you want to read from that chapter one, Antonio?
sure, I'd be happy to.
Excellent. That'd be great.
Yeah, chapter one is entitled a cherished child, and it is the defining touchstone by which I live my life. It recounts the breakfast scene and a physical description of my mother as well as her marriage uh, at age 13, which was illegal. So here it is. My earliest memory is a happy one. This recollection became the touchstone of my life, leading me back to Petra and the love she taught me. Petra normally dressed at home in house dresses, but for field work she dressed like all the other farm worker women wearing khaki pants, long sleeve shirts, and a large brimmed straw hat upon her head. Except for the hat, these work clothes were the clothes that Petra wore while she served as breakfast. To me, my mother was at her most beautiful in these early morning hours. Petra was small, maybe 5'2" tall, with a womanly body that by then had given birth to 11, with 3 more on the way. Petra had been married since she was 13 years old, illegally, to take care of my father's 6-year-old son, and then they began picking in the fields very early. My brother at age 8, and she also joined in with him. So, as I was saying earlier, that she had a broad face with high cheekbones, dark brown eyes, a ready smile, and an effortless embrace that reached my heart when she hugged me. Of course, she was the mother to us all, but to me, as the family's mute child, excuse me, but to me, as the family's mute child, she took extra time. Her kindness came naturally to Petra. I would have but these 4 short years that I spent with her when she taught me to love. Although I have thousands of images of my childhood with the Salazars, it is this pre-dawn scene in the kitchen, the image that I could turn to as a touchstone that I was never broken. And that is really the amount of love that I received from her prior to my kidnapping. And I was kidnapped at age 4.5 in front of most of my siblings by a white pedophile couple, John and Sarah Hobson. And so I was.
They sorry to interrupt, but they groomed you and your family too. So they started some type of
Yes,
like the classic steps, like hi, meet your family. Can we take him for the weekend? That kind of thing. Before
yes, absolutely. They groomed my family for 6 months. They were bilingual. They tried to give us or shower us with gifts to further entrust them. But when I was stolen, I had already been affected by their treatment, and as I said, and what was important to me as a poor monolingual child coming from a very poor family, there was no effort by the Arizona Police Department, Phoenix, to make any search for me. And that is actually the same story that most children of color and their families endure. Had I been a white child, then the level of investigation would have been enormous. They would have put tremendous resources in trying to find me, and I would have been found. But because of the racism, that was not mine to have.
And this was in the early 60s, correct?
Yes, I was taken in 1961, and I was with the Hobsons basically through 1971.
So 10 years. They took you to California to Hemet, right? A different jurisdiction.
Yes.
So, and I mean, really endured horrible abuse.
Yes.
I read the book, and I mean, I'm sorry that you went through all that. Mm-hmm. So you endured for a time, but they were kind of networked into kind of a pedophile network. So this is kind of this trafficking that's happening today, even happened back then in the 60s. Yeah. So you were trafficked, you were abducted and trafficked, right?
Yes, that's correct. And I mean, one extreme example is I was sent away for 3 summers to a ranch by myself, which was a front for pedophiles. and just abandoned there and picked up 3 months later. And that occurred for 3 full seasons. Um, so, my uh, uh, John and Sarah Hobson, I'm sure, made plenty of money off my services. And it was only after my abuse was discovered uh, by a by a gay ranch hand uh, who said this was unacceptable, and he stopped it overnight. And that was my first intervention in my life.
And you kind of had guardian angel. You were very fortunate. You had a number of guardian angels and helpers that helped you on the way. Right? Would you
Yes,
agree with that?
yes. What my only choice when I was a young boy was to run to whatever Chicano family I could find and get a taste of my culture and remind myself of my Spanish, and that was important. Uh, but you know what was more important was that I had a North Star to survive. I was absolutely convinced that with my mother's love and all the thousands and thousands of images that I carried with me of my family, um, that that I had plenty to keep me occupied, and and I also needed to find a way to communicate with my family daily. And I have a section here that is about it is which is about the Adobe burial grounds, and I'd like to read it to you now if I could.
Please do. Please do.
Okay. Um, this story recounts how I buried and reburied my family every day as a way to remember them. So it starts like this: the most visceral the most visceral memory I have at the Adobe house begins at my favorite orange tree. It was old growth, a mighty tree to me, with an unusually large canopy. I used my canopy to make my own private room away from the Hobsons. It was a place where they never came to visit. I sought solace, not knowing what to do, but finding my mind and my heart turned towards anything that might help me get in touch with them. I would sit under the orange tree, and eventually I came up with the idea of collecting the spare and broken adobe bricks alongside my home to place under my tree. They were heavily weathered after decades of exposure, old and crumbling. And I used these bricks in a way that absorbed most of my attention every day for 2 years. I started to form my own collection of abandoned bricks into an arrangement that symbolized each member of my family. As I began to bury the bricks near the trunk of the orange tree, uh, I miss my family so intensely that I wanted to have a way to regularly visit and talk to them, to let them know I was still alive, that I missed them, and I would be coming back. And as I began to build what eventually formed in my head as a burial yard, the inspiration to do so came from some unknown place and quickly took over my imagination. I made sure that I had enough bricks for each family member, 13 siblings and both parents. I laid them out without names since I did not know how to read or write Spanish. I made holes in the ground deep enough to hold each brick. I then finally buried each one by placing them in the graves using only 2 inches of ground cover, then patting the earth down upon each one and ending the day. I initially buried them in a very haphazard family fashion. When I returned to the tree the next day, I began the process all over again. It was deeply reassuring to me and quickly developed into a compulsion. Um, as my burial imagination evolved, I realized that I needed to organize the actual burial ground a bit better. Suddenly, it became clear to me that each of my parents needed to have their own place. I was psychologically compelled to engage in the reburial of my family every day, a ritual that both soothed me and connected me to my lost Salazar family. Once I realized the need for better organization, I I got an unexpected calmness of mind. I was no longer overcome with daily anxiety. I never told the Hobsons about my burial ground, my daily unearthing and reburial of that, or that I talked with my family during with these adobe bricks. It was not until we left the adobe house to move to a house in an isolated uh, olive orchard that I was forced or able to end these efforts. I never repeated the burial again for my family after we moved. I missed my burial grounds, but I'd found out about our move a few days earlier. I used the extra time to make my burial grounds would be safe when I left. I believe I had taken care of my family and I willed myself to endure until the time I could return to them. I never considered a burial space for myself, for I believed I would soon be returning to Petra's embrace.
So that's kind of how you adapted or managed to the loss of your family too. It wasn't just, it was your mother and your brothers and sisters, right?
Yeah,
You missed that
yeah.
belonging.
And it was a vehicle for me to tell them every day where I was, how I was doing, and that I remembered all of them. And that was the best solve that naturally came to me.
So you lived with the Hobsons, Sarah and John, and they moved to what, DC, and you ended up in Lodi as an early teenager, correct?
Yes.
Can you talk about what it was like going to school and how you kind of adapted to kind of some of these newer challenges as you were getting back into academics?
Well, uh, what changed the entire life story of mine is that I met Cesar Chavez when I was 15 years old, when I'd already picked the first of 3 seasons out of 4 as a farm worker, and and he gave us an occasion to meet him at a labor hall in advance of the actual rally. And so many of our students from my high school attended, and we were so impressed with his candor and his gentleness, and sort of the miracle of Cesar Chavez was right there in front of us. He then invited us to become his student bodyguards for that rally. And afterwards, he asked us if we would do that uh, for a long time. And so I volunteered for 3 years uh, throughout the Central Valley, attending every rally with about 40 students. And we were so proud of ourselves with the honor of being asked to defend him. And this was a very common uh, approach that Cesar used, and I think it really helped, prevent, any early assassinations, I would say. So it was something uh, which was just so important to me. You know, Cesar. I met him when I was 15. I'd worked for a year volunteering for the UFW. And when I was 16 years old, he took me aside and he said, Antonio, I think you should become a labor lawyer for the labor movement. I think you can do that. And I'd never had a dream before other than returning to my family. And I ran with the dream at the very instant he told me to do so. And I ran with that dream for years and achieved what he wanted me to achieve, which
That's
was to
amazing.
be a labor lawyer for the labor movement. Uh, but
And
I
do you mind reading that section, Antonio? There's a section in here from chapter 15 about meeting Cesar Chavez, because I don't know if people talk about him enough. Maybe you could
well,
read that if you don't mind.
I mean, I can give you a summary of it, but
Okay.
I would particularly like to emphasize uh, the other major factor that Cesar uh, uh, offered me in my life, which transformed my life. I met him in April of 1970 for the first time with a group of students. And when he arrived, he he said that he wanted to hear 5 minutes of introduction from each of us. And I told him the same story I had been telling people for years, that I'd been adopted by John and Sarah Hobson, because that's what I was forced to say, but that I had a real family, and my family had picked fruit and vegetables for 40 years, and I had as well. And and I let him know that I had no ambivalence as to who my family was. And he must have seen something in me that I couldn't see as a young man. And I think he saw promise. And then when I was 16 years old, he made that radical change in my life. And that's the first major benefit I got from Cesar. The equally interesting story is my having to ask Cesar for a very serious favor, that had he not granted it to me, I would have not have been able to finish the rest of my education at UCSC. And this is the scene where I asked Cesar Chavez whether he would allow me to work as a Teamster represented cannery of 2,200 seasonal jobs with high wages in Lodi, California. This is where he said to me, "Antonio, we know you, and that you'll always be with La Causa." He said, "Finish my education," which allowed me to fulfill my dream that he wanted for me. So this is how it begins. After working for Cesar 3 years, including picking strawberries on the only UFW ranch during the 1973 lettuce strike, I needed a key favor. Surrounded by a few of his members, maybe 5 or 6 farm workers, Cesar seemed relaxed and happy to see me again. I was nervous. Cesar paused, as if he knew I had an important question to ask him. I was in front of his other workers, realizing there was no opportunity to meet with him privately as I asked him my core problem. I tried to calm down, to handle my questions with dignity and not to fall apart in front of him. I reminded him of the huge Pacific Coast Producers plant in Lodi, and I told him that without getting this job, I would not be able to finish my education, period. And then I asked him whether I could join the Teamsters so I could secure enough money for my education. I had no idea as to what he would think of me once I made that request. I steeled myself for the full range of potential reactions. I knew that once he said no, I would fully comply, and I told him that. Cesar looked at me quizzically and with affection. This is the last response I ever anticipated. He said in front of the other men gathered there, "Antonio, we know you." He was so quietly enthusiastic with me, completely unperturbed by my question. He seemed pleased at my deference and that I was willing to accept any decision that he might make. Cesar said that the UFW would continue to be my family and that he knew I would continue to fight for La Causa. In that dramatic, matter-of-fact moment, my future ability to survive college was in the balance. Cesar told me to go ahead and sign up for the work at the cannery and use the money I earned to finish my schooling. I was astounded. I had never anticipated a positive answer. Cesar, after knowing me for 3 years, had in fact full confidence in my loyalty. So that was an enormous favor to ask. You know, the Teamsters were our nemesis. And, but that's the only solution that I had at that moment. I could not work for just a minimum wage, and but for that, I would have not made it all the way through.
So that allowed you to make it to UCSC, correct?
Yes.
And can you talk? Yeah, what was that like? I mean,
Yes.
Lodi. I mean, going back to that central area, it was much different back then than it is now. Very racially segregated, and Caesar is very dangerous work what he was doing, right?
Yes, and it was very poor conditions, uh, you know, uh, ill treatment of workers, generally not adequate water, generally not bathrooms, and and as an example of the wages I made when I was picking strawberries during the 1973 lettuce strike, I was paid $2 an hour, and for an entire box of 12 strawberries, I made 25 cents. And you can imagine that doesn't go very far. But I lived with a very large Mexican family, and that was very helpful. Lived in a trailer in the backyard, and then in the late afternoons, I conducted a a independent study on migrant housing, and I visited every flop house in Salinas, uh, and I would just add that I knew about flop houses. I'd been living in a $3.50 motel under 200 square feet for 4 years that was only visited by truck drivers and their prostitutes. So it was small quarters with the crazed Hobsons.
Right. So you came a long way to get
Yes,
out of that to
yeah,
UCSC, which is, I
yes.
mean, Santa Cruz is really light. Can you talk about how your education kind of changed? I mean, you were mute at one point, and you worked your way up to academic skills, right? Or the ladder?
Yes, yes. I had lost my muteness by the time I was 7, and it was obvious that I had a very ready mind. And so, one aspect of the book is when I just turned 7 years old by 1 week. I had never attended, you know, pre-K, kindergarten, first, second, third, fourth grade. And the Hobsons had me placed in the fifth grade at age 7, simply because I could read at that level. And that was a disaster. And so, uh, but that's the level of pushing that they always forced upon me.
Right. So,
And
can you talk? Yeah, please continue.
yeah, and with regard to UC Santa Cruz, I had an excellent education. Uh, I was able to get a degree in Latin American studies with honors. I was able uh, to win the Danforth, uh, which provided me many years of education in graduate school. Uh, but I left graduate school because I decided I was in the wrong place. I only wanted to be a labor lawyer, and that's when I left and joined UC Davis.
Right. So you stayed in Central California, one way or another, one other place.
Yes,
Can you?
yes, our picking range was 50 miles in either direction. So we picked everything other than grapes and of course lettuce, um, from vegetables to pears to cherries and walnuts. So
Can you talk about what it was like working for the UFW and kind of what rights and benefits you were fighting to obtain for the workers?
well, sure. I mean, you know, I'm a union side labor lawyer, and I've negotiated many contracts with international unions on behalf of their employees. And we just wanted to have some modicum of those rights. And but the most important thing we wanted to do was to be recognized as a union. and so the UFW was, became the defining vehicle for Chicanos in this country, became part of the entire progressive movement. We were fully involved in the general labor movement, and I coordinated many many campaigns where the UFW was the lead participant.
And what was it like working alongside Cesar Chavez?
Well, it was a dream. Excuse me. I'd always heard of him, as everyone had. I couldn't believe that I had the good fortune to meet him. I couldn't believe that he actually saw something in me that I could not see for myself, and that he just seemed resolved in my promise. And he also knew I was an extremely hard worker. Also at this time, I was student body president of 4,000 students, and was doing well academically.
Right. So you spent a lot of time and you were able to make it back and connect with your birth family, right?
Yes, I was. It was a 24-year search. My only goal was to see my mother Petra alive, and of course, get to know my siblings. And she was in fact alive, and I had worries about meeting her, when in fact they were for naught. All she wanted was, her hope that I spoke Spanish, which I did, and that she could instantly recognize me as her son. That took about 20 seconds when she met me, and it was just a very precious, kind moment, moving, and so I at least reached that far.
Interesting. And you're kind of a longer in life convert to Judaism too, right?
Yes,
Can you
I've been a
talk a little bit
convert
about
for
that?
yes, I've been a convert for 30 years. I have married into an entirely Jewish family. I'm part of the Reform tradition, and it was a faith that seemed to fit all my needs and values, and I've been treated kindly by the Jewish community as well. So it took me a few years to think about it, but it's now been 30 years, and it has become my faith.
And you've just had an amazing arc of your life from really just the darkest. And when I think of your story, I think of other people who are in circumstances similar to your childhood. Like this trafficking is still happening, which is really sad. And you're really a fortunate person to thrive at the other end.
Yeah,
So hopefully
but
people can learn from this story.
yeah, I wrote this book for two reasons. One was to express my love for my mother, and then the other reason was to reach out to children who have suffered abuse of any kind, to remind them to protect their hearts, to remind them that they can still love in their future, and to not be fully controlled by what happened to them. That doesn't mean that we don't go through a great deal of pain, but to have the hope always that it will get better. And it is my belief that my example will give people strength, and that was a big purpose behind my book. I'd like to emphasize that my book is not focused on sexual issues. Yes, there is a very severe period of early childhood abuse, but that is it's just a mere backdrop. You know, my story is about pride in my culture, perseverance, return to family, and my 40 years with them. So, uh, I just hope that my book is inspirational and that people, you know, use what occurred to me as a background, but then to really um, get down, into the sort of uh, hopeful moments which actually dominate the book itself.
Yeah, great. I mean, it's really an amazing book, amazing story. And the best place to get it right now is on Amazon, and there's a hardback coming out. There's a lot more in this book, a lot more stories about your marriage and kind of your career. The best place, Amazon right now, and the hardback's coming out, you said?
Yes, that's correct. And exactly.
Gotcha. And so you can,
next month.
and do you have social media or if anybody wants to contact you or ask follow-up questions?
Yes, yes, I do. I've people can contact me at asalazarhb@comcast.net. I have a full social media team and an advertising team who served me well. So
so the email is the best way to contact you.
Yes, exactly.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, thanks so much for your time. Thanks for writing the book. It's really inspirational. Again, the title is Antonio, We Know You, a memoir by Antonio Salazar-Hobson. Thanks so much for your time.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate being here.
All right. Awesome. Thank you. Stay there. Stay there.